Welcome to the Growth Level Podcast, the show dedicated to helping you grow your digital agency. Whether you're a designer, developer, or marketer, whether you build websites, apps, or otherwise, this show is here to help you drive more leads and close more sales. So with that, let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. Today, I'm joined by Jeremy Lasky and Danny Gonzalez of Perception. Perception is a motion graphics agency that does a ton of work in the TV and film industries. If you go to their website, you'll surely recognize some of the work they've done, starting with an ongoing project they did with HBO and The Sopranos, to now working regularly with the Marvel franchise. You'd be hard-pressed to have missed them. Those cool heads-up displays and interactive screens that Tony Stark uses in the Iron Man films, very likely the work of Perception. Jeremy and Danny have a really great story behind how they started working together at the creative agency RGA and eventually went on to start Perception. We get into how they got their very first clients, how that snowballed into making a name for themselves in the TV and film industry, and where they see the agency going in the future. So without giving too much away, let's go to our interview with Jeremy and Danny from Perception. Danny and Jeremy, welcome to the Growth Level Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us, Simon.
Hey, Simon, thrilled to be here.
Great. So I was wondering if you could share with the listeners a bit about your backgrounds and how you got started with Perception.
Sure. Perception is 15 years old. We founded in the fall of 2001. And prior to Perception, Danny and myself met at a pretty famous studio in New York called RGA, R. Greenberg Associates, where we both really started our careers in the feature film and visual effects world. I came in out of college to work there on title sequences and commercials and visual effects. Danny was a visual effects artist there, and we worked on a good deal of commercials and movie work throughout our 5 to 6 years at RGA. And that studio basically changed their mission right around the time we left to become more of a digital and interactive agency. So the two of us were faced with a choice of either staying at RGA to do websites and broadband, or to move on with our careers and go forth into the marketplace. So I took that door. I started freelancing in motion graphics and television and broadcast design. Danny stayed aboard at RGA for a little while, but the two of us stayed in constant touch and started to plant the seeds of creating our own studio. And over the next few months, and I guess close to a year after that, we founded Perception, and we founded it as a motion graphics studio. You know, right around this time, desktop applications were getting more and more sophisticated. Software and hardware were getting a lot more affordable, and we realized that we could actually output the same quality of visual effects, design, and animation work that we were doing at RGA for a fraction of the price using Final Cut and After Effects and Macs. Desktop computers like Macs and some PCs as well. So we put the plan in place, and I'll let Danny kind of take it from there.
Yeah, so from there, it was a lot of hustling. You know, when you start your own business, there's a ton you have to do, from turning on the lights, painting the walls, putting up the lights, and things like that, to trying to reach out to a ton of different clients to get work in to pay the bills. So eventually we had an opportunity to pitch a Sopranos campaign for HBO, and we got it, and that was kind of that was the first project of Perception, and then from there it kind of snowballed. You know, we did a lot of work with HBO. We ended up doing a lot of work with ESPN. A lot of the folks from both those companies spread into different companies, so we started working with Showtime, NBC, ABC. So it started a snowball effect.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a lot of this story, I know we were talking before the show, is on your website. Or a YouTube channel rather. So we'll link up that in the show notes because it's a really interesting story. One thing I did want to get into is exactly what motion graphics is. So you mentioned you did some work with The Sopranos on HBO. What was that work, and how does it tie into what you're doing now?
So that was one of the, I guess the first of many campaigns that we worked on for HBO over the next decade, and they were these quarterly marketing acquisition campaigns for HBO to acquire more subscribers. And again, they were quarterly, and we would do dozens and dozens of versions of these campaigns, and essentially they were all built on whatever was the big HBO series that quarter or big theatricals that they were going to be premiering. So we were working on campaigns that were leveraged on Sopranos, Sex and the City, 6 Feet Under, The Wire. These are all the big shows back, in the early to mid 2000s, and all these early campaigns were built on those foundations. So what we were tasked with was not only designing these campaigns and making them beautiful and elegant, but we actually wrote them as well. We had to do the scripts, we had to put the music together, we obviously did all the editing, the design, the animation. Sometimes we actually did some shooting for them, where we had to create some elements or shoot some talent. But all in all, they were massive. They were usually 6 to 8 weeks of work, anywhere from 50 to 100 versions. Each one had to have their own tag at the end for a different service provider, like a Comcast or a Time Warner Cable or Cox. And we would just build these modular campaigns so that they were easily customizable. And we were able to do these very, very quickly, cost effectively. HBO was always very happy with our speed and our output, and that's what led to a pretty long and successful relationship that we had with them.
Okay, so at the start, you sort of touched on it before. It was just the two of you, am I right in saying? So you were putting together all of that work yourselves, or were you working with some contractors, or did you have employees at that time? What did that look like?
No, so in the very beginning, it was just Jeremy, myself. So again, I would put the producer role on and the visual effects artist, and Jeremy would put the designer and writer role.
Animator.
Hat on, an animator. And together we would just crank out all the different versions that we needed to get done, based on the schedule that week. And then not only did we have, the one HBO project, but little by little, we started to layer on, a project from ESPN at the same time. And, so we were working probably, 14-hour days between trying to run the company, trying to get new clients, and cranking out the work. And slowly but surely, then we realized, okay, in order for us to, stay alive, we needed to find more help. So that's when we started to hire, some contractors, and eventually, 1 to 2 staff designers. Probably within 1 month time frame. I think we, the first one we added, and then a month later we added a second staffer to help us with all the different work.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges for us early on was, to wear all these different hats. As I mentioned earlier, the two of us really came up as artists, as designers and visual effects artists on computers all day, very focused on the work at hand. But running a company, we very quickly realized we could not just devote our entire day to sitting on the box and doing the work. So that's what really inspired us to start finding other artists to help out with the actual effects and design and animation work, so we could become more of the voice of the company, go out and present to clients, pitch the work, produce the work, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of got a crash course in all of these different roles that, of course, we never really had the opportunity to do before Perception, because there were 100 people at RGA that were doing all these things. But, all of a sudden, the two of us would find ourselves in a conference room in front of HBO executives having to be incredible presenters and pitchmen for a brand new Sopranos campaign. And this is talk about throwing yourself into the deep end. But that's what ultimately, got us to work, was the passion, the excitement. And, the two of us are real genuine guys, so they really felt that. We weren't sales guys. We're the guys doing the work and coming up with the ideas, and we're also in the boardroom selling it. So that's what really inspired HBO to give us that campaign and take a chance on us, that they were very happy they did.
Yeah, that's great. It's such a classic dichotomy, the working on your business versus in the business. But ultimately, if you are doing the pitching and trying to get on these big clients, you do need to know, what is going on with the business. And
that's exactly right. And we definitely learned that it's not something we knew at the beginning for sure. It happened over years and years, and just realizing that we can't do everything, and making tough decisions, and realizing that if we're going to grow, if we're going to get to the next level, if we're going to survive as a company, we need to step back from certain things and responsibilities, find really talented people to come in and start to take these little pieces away from us so that we could focus on the growth, the vision, driving perception in the right direction. And it was a smart thing and an important thing that we did. We sort of wish we knew it early on, but we figured it out along the way.
So one of the things I wanted to get into, you mentioned this in your YouTube series, which, like I said, we'll link up to, is how the technologies have changed from when you first started to, sort of where you are today. Can you talk a little bit about that? It sounded like it was fairly analog, to say the least, in the when you first started, as opposed to now. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So when we first started, if you went into one of the edit rooms, so to speak, they used to call them edit bays. We had a Final Cut set up with a desktop. I guess back then it was the Aqua G3s when Final Cut first came out, if you remember the Aqua G3s, and two monitors, a big mixer board. It was pretty. We had a rack that would connect the beta to the digi beta and all the different audio patches and things like that. Whereas you cut to today, we just have a desk with Premiere or Final Cut on there, and we just do it all right then and there with a small mic. So it's very, and of course the mixer and all that is all built in. So everything is advanced so, exponentially that, the color grading and the matte painting and the tracking and all that, back when I was doing visual effects was very separated. You went to one machine to do, certain things, you went to another, and then the Flame and Inferno came out. That had a lot of power, and you could do a lot of tracking and things like that. But now, After Effects and Cinema 4D and Maya, all those applications and all the software have all these different modules in there that you really rarely have to leave to use, a different type of program to have to track or whatever it is.
And then just the technology in general, of running a business and marketing yourself, we've certainly seen a quantum leap from VHS tapes and three-quarter tapes and then DVDs, that the two of us were making copies by the dozens, putting them into FedEx packages, sending messengers all around New York and all around the country. This is the only way we could promote. This is the only way we could sell. We had a very primitive website back then. It just wasn't obviously what it is today. So online portfolios and marketing yourself through the internet or even emailers, it was still very early days. So the two of us, again, doing whatever we needed to do to survive and grow, we were cold calling. We were cold calling 50 to 100 people a day, sending out hundreds of reels a week, following up, literally going door to door in some instances to try to introduce ourselves and sell ourselves. So we kind of saw technology thrust forward just in those aspects pretty quickly, and we adapted as necessary. But we look back and wish we had some of the technologies that we have today just for promotion and marketing. Would have made it a lot easier. I remember days and weeks where the two of us were cutting labels out for tapes and stuffing envelopes and sending out party mailers and just doing everything by hand in order to generate business.
Yeah, wow. That's actually a really good segue to the topic I want to get into next, which is sort of acquiring clients and specifically your first clients. So you mentioned it was HBO and the work on Sopranos. Was that a result of some of those cold calls and mailers, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I think that it all came about because we set goals very early on, and we always had a list of dream clients, and that was a list that we would constantly add to and then circle when we achieve the goal. We're both really big on setting targets and goals in life. And right at the top of that list, and I'm sure we're going to come back to this later, was Marvel. And that certainly didn't happen overnight, but a lot of the networks and the ad agencies we did have on that list, we got to pretty quickly, especially once we got HBO. That's kind of the flagship, most premium broadcast network. So once we had that, that made it a lot easier for other networks to kind of trust us and take a chance on us. And then ESPN came, and ESPN, of course, led to ABC because, they're both owned by the same company. And then NBC Sports came, and they all, once you get a few, you start to create a name for yourself and a reputation that others will start to take a chance and try you out.
Definitely. You touched on you have a ton of clients at the moment, but one of which that was one of your dream clients, and now I assume one of your biggest clients is Marvel. Now that's a really cool client to work with, and I think a lot of people will recognize the work you've done in their films, but may not know. So can you talk about what kind of work you do in those films and what people might recognize within them?
Sure. So it ranges depending on what they call us for, but with Iron Man 2, it was designing the complete digital universe for Tony Stark. So that was his phone, his smart screens within his home and lab, doing some concept work for the holograms, the interactive mirror that he's getting changed in front of. So that was huge. That started off with a couple of shots here and there that they asked us to conceptualize, and then they loved the work so much that it ballooned to over 135 shots of the film. And then from there, we've worked on every single Marvel movie since then, whether it be on conceptual development or title sequences or, coming up with futuristic technology for all the superheroes and even the villains.
That's one of the great honors that we have, is being able to collaborate with them oftentimes before they even start shooting any frame of film. We get to actually collaborate on the story insofar as how the technology might inspire, influence certain characters, certain scenes, certain moments. And that's an amazing opportunity that we get.
I thought that was so cool when I saw that on your website, like when Tony Stark's playing around with his UI or his HUD or whatever it is. You guys have actually created that. So just to give listeners an idea of what kind of work's involved in that, for say a 3 or 4 second shot where he's playing around with his interface, how long would that take you guys to create?
Oh, well, the time frame varies. It depends on how long the scene is, but to give you an example how the process flow goes is, we'll get a call. They'll ask us to come up with, let's say, an interface for a phone. We'll come up with a couple of different design concepts in style, just the style frame mode, not no animation yet. They'll pick one, or they'll like a font from one, and maybe the design from another, more the experience of what Tony Stark is interacting with. And then from there, we'll build it out and flesh it out a little bit more. Once they like the final look, that's when we take it into the animation world and start creating the animations that make it come to life. And that's when we add that what we call soul to the graphics and to the interface, or to any piece of technology that these superheroes or supervillains are interacting with. And that's, I think, one of the things that Marvel really enjoys, or why they really enjoy coming to us, is because there's a different style and technique we use for designing futuristic technologies for Tony Stark than there is for when we're designing it for S.H.I.E.L.D. and when we're designing it for Thor's girlfriend, or when we're designing it for, any of their other films.
Yeah, in a way, the technology is helping to define who these characters are, and it's showcasing another dimension of their personalities to audiences, even if it's a subtle or even subliminal thing. Just like their costume tells the audience about them, so too does their technology, whether it's the wallpaper on their phone or a hologram or a heads-up display. And that's true in all movies now. Technology has become such a part of who people are, and we get to help craft that. And that's such a big part of what we do here is storytelling, whether it's for filmmakers or for technology clients. Everything we do is built on telling a great story and building a narrative.
Absolutely. So As far as the creative process goes, how involved are you guys in particular with that? Or what are your main functions in the agency right now is probably a better question.
I think you kind of touched on it earlier with, working on the business and less so in the business. The two of us certainly are involved in the work, but we're not actually creating every pixel of every project here. That would be impossible. And to be honest with you, our team has leapfrogged the two of us in technical knowledge and abilities, and that's great. We're always looking to hire people who can do things we could never do, which I think is a great philosophy when you're building your team, and we started that a long time ago. So we've assembled an amazing group of artists, designers, and thinkers who are doing it all, and we're involved. We're helping craft the vision. We're certainly involved in a lot of presentations and face-to-face meetings, but the two of us are really focused on the company at large, and keeping it growing, keeping it healthy and happy, and looking for new opportunities always, and telling the world our story.
Yep, awesome. So, how many people are working within the team at the moment?
There's 15 core staff. And then from there, again, it depends on how busy we are, and we'll, expand and contract as necessary, adding, freelancers, depending on what the project needs are.
Okay, great. And what kind of roles mainly? Is it primarily creative roles?
Right. So we have producers. We have a COO who runs day-to-day operations of the company, and then the producers answer to him. We have coordinators that also help with day-to-day projects and deliverables. And then the rest of the team is on the creative side. So we have our chief creative officer, art directors, a bunch of design-animators. So they'll do 2D, 3D design and animation. And then we have our UX team as well when it comes to technology projects, who sometimes dabble in the film world with us as well. And that's why our futuristic interfaces work so well, and why, again, we have this constant feed of creating these things in cinema, and they're very realistic, and that's why the technology companies reach out to us, because they're all fanboys and fangirls of these comic book heroes, and they see the films and they're like, wow, that could actually work in 2 years. I'm going to call these guys and they can help me with my product that I have for, IBM or Microsoft or whatever it is that they might be working on. So there lies the world that Perception plays in, bringing science fiction to life.
Yeah, that's really cool and a topic I'd love to get into. So you obviously do a lot of work in film. Can you tell us a bit about how those sort of applications in film can apply to the business world and creating business results? Sure.
So, what happened was after Iron Man 2 came out, after all the work we did for Tony Stark's interfaces and his gadgets, we started getting all of this amazing attention from the tech world, specifically certain tech blogs like Engadget and Gizmodo wrote us up about the amazing technology of Tony Stark, and pretty much a week later we started getting calls from large tech companies. Microsoft was one of the first to reach out to us. They actually showed up to visit us right after the film came out because they were interested in collaborating with us. We started getting calls from Samsung and IBM and all kinds of really innovative technology companies from around the world. Some startups even reached out to us, and everybody was very attracted to our team's unique vision for user experience design coming from our cinematic perspective. So, that's something that we really pride ourselves on, and it definitely is a very unique niche. The fact that we get to design user experiences and interfaces for films as well as real technology companies. And I think that's one of the most appealing things about working with us is that we have this we call it a science fiction feedback loop. And the more work we do in movies, the more we inspire real technology companies and engineers to want to create what they saw in the films. And then the filmmakers are inspired by real technology innovators, and they want to bring that technologic reality, that what's in the technologic climate of today's society, that we could import into the film world to create believability and authenticity and ground it in what is actually possible. The idea of going too far ahead will just create confusion to audiences. So we always ground our film work in something that is in existence currently. And maybe it's a slight leap forward or a big leap forward, but it certainly has a great foundation in what's going on in today's technological climate.
So can you give us a specific example of how an IBM might use motion graphics? Is it, a lot to do with their website or, how they might use a motion graphics solution? It doesn't have to be IBM. I just thought I'd use them as an example.
Sure. Yeah, so, we can't really talk about the IBM projects too much, but, they wanted to bring, you can associate, Jarvis with Watson, with their product that's out now, but, that's as much as I could talk about that. But I can give you an example where, if you remember Captain America, the Winter Soldier, there's a car chase with Nick Fury, and he's in his black truck, and he's racing along, and the truck takes over, and it starts to kind of drive itself autonomously, and it can predict, a truck coming from around the corner and things like that, or a vehicle coming from around the corner, and it knows that if it speeds up, it won't hit it, but if it stays at its current speed, it might crash into it, things like that. So that movie Winter Soldier was released, and about 2 weeks later, we got a call from an automobile company that I can't mention, but we had a project with them that we worked on because what they saw was exactly what they were trying to build, and they needed to contact us in order to visualize and help them bring to life the autonomous vision that they had for their vehicle of the future.
Really, really cool. All right, so you mentioned that you're both big on goals. What's the main goal for Perception moving forward into 2017?
Yeah, so, the goals from one standpoint, as far as wanting to do more technology work, for sure. Doing a lot more cutting edge applications, experiences. I'm big into having really cool experiences. So anything in the experiential world, we'd love to work on a project that's in a some sort of theme park, where we can create the full experience from when the family arrives to when they leave and what happens in between. Another goal is to work on some other feature films as well. We have a blast working and coming up with conceptualizing all the future technologies that these villains and these superheroes use to save the world or try to destroy it.
Yeah, I think for us the main goal is always just constant and never-ending improvement and growth. So we're always seeking out opportunities to do that, to build the team, to add to our capabilities and our expertise, and whether that means virtual reality or autonomous cars, whatever the next generation of user experience for some bleeding-edge technology might be, we want to be there. And that's very inspiring to us. We're all tech geeks in a way. We track technology constantly. We go to CES every year. We're going to conferences all the time. So we're always looking out for what's just over the horizon and how we can be involved and how we can add value.
And not to look too far back in the past, but if there were things you could do differently, if you're starting Perception again from scratch, would you do things differently? And if so, how so?
I think Jeremy touched on it before, where when we started hiring more help, we started to realize that we divide and conquer, and things became scary at first because we had a bigger payroll to keep up, but at the same time it alleviated us to really work on the business and not necessarily worry about what's going on in the business every single day, putting out fires, and takes up a lot of your time. So if there was one thing I'd like to go back and change, is probably hiring people a little bit sooner, and not just anybody, but more of someone who would help with definitely some sort of head creative, but definitely someone on the business side that would help run day-to-day operations. And I think that was one of the biggest pushes and growth that we felt at Perception, is when we hired that day-to-day business person, like a managing director that we hired. That's when we really felt the biggest growth spurt.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a fear of just letting go as a business owner and an entrepreneur. and being so involved in everything from the birth to the present, and the idea of giving over some of that responsibility and ownership to another individual is definitely a scary proposition. But when you have the right person and everything lines up the way it should, then there should be a great amount of success that follows. And we did it, and we figured it out, and we had the right person. And as Danny said, it led to a very successful run. And it's probably something that we both would have done earlier if we knew what it would lead to. And ultimately, what it leads to is the owners being a little happier and having a little more free time, which is a great thing for any entrepreneur who's buried.
So I was going to wrap up there, but you touched on something that I would love to get into, and that's the hiring process. So I think just about every business owner has some sort of horror story, or if not a horror story, at least a story that didn't end particularly well about hiring. Sure. Are there steps that you put in place to mitigate the risk of bad hires, or have you had any of those stories yourself?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of people work for us over 15 years. There's no question. We've had some amazing hires and some mistakes. I think that's inevitable. Mm-hmm. I think what happens is over time, again, just experience is the best teacher, is that you start to recognize certain patterns of behavior. You become psychologists as much as business owners and entrepreneurs. You really become masters of human psychology, and you can start to see red flags, patterns develop, and you notice them, and you notice them quicker and quicker each time, and you realize, I've seen this movie before, and I know how it ends, and I don't need to sit through the whole thing to watch the destruction. So you start making quicker and quicker decisions and acting a little faster, and you trust your instincts. When something doesn't feel right, when somebody's not behaving right, when they're not communicating a certain way, when you're getting client feedback that's not in line with what it should be, then you can't hesitate. You must take action, and you make a decision. And if you make a bad decision, that's fine as long as you make a decision. And we're very big on that, is not being paralyzed by indecisiveness. So just make a decision, and if it's the wrong one, you make another decision to fix it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think also something that's helped us as well is, we do have a process in place where, if we find a couple of people that, are wanting to fill the position, we'll have a conversation with them on the phone. If we feel like it's a good vibe, we bring them in and we speak with them. And then after that, we actually created a perception handbook that is a work of art that not only does it have, all the protocols and pay time off and everything that everybody wants to know, but it also has a lot about the company culture, what we stand for, how we kind of live and die as a team. So there's a lot of values in that handbook that when people see it, they know they want to be a part of it, and that weeds out a lot of the people that we know won't be a right fit. So I think that's something also that if I had to share a bit of knowledge with other entrepreneurs is, get yourself in order of some sort of, even if it's a small handbook, but create some sort of value system for your company, because you're the one who's going to be running it, and you got to be, try to find the right people. And if their values line up with yours, then it should be a good fit.
I think the easier hires, not that they're easy to find for sure, but the easier hires are definitely artists in terms of being able to see the work, being able to see a portfolio, and being able to see a history of output that hopefully lines up with what your standards are and what your expectations are. It's pretty clear cut when somebody's got it and when they don't. The harder hires are for sure the management roles, the project management roles, producer roles, because these are more of the intangibles. These are more of somebody's energy, attention span, communication skills, leadership abilities. And we have great interviews with people. They do a great sales pitch at an interview, and sometimes that's the best they've ever done, and it just goes downhill from there. Yeah. And that's always a challenge. I want to make sure that we get the guy who we interviewed, and that wasn't just like a one-hit wonder.
Yep.
And they come in and then they just become, something a little different. And again, that's a lot harder to identify with someone who's who's not the artist. So those are the roles that are definitely the most challenging for both of us, and we just have to go on the chemistry, the energy, the communication, and usually we'll go a couple rounds of interviews, to make sure that they just, it wasn't just a one-time deal, that's actually like what you see is what you get every day, and go from there.
Yeah, great. Well, I think that's a good point to end on. So, Jeremy, Danny, thank you so much for being with us on the show today. Where can people go to
Pleasure.
find you online?
So our website is experienceperception.com, which is going to be relaunching very shortly. So keep checking back for that. We're on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. It's Perception NYC. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and it's all on the website. So check us out.
Perfect. And like I said, there's a great YouTube series that goes into your story a bit deeper. So we'll link up to that as well. But guys, thanks again. Really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining me on the Growth Lever podcast, brought to you by Content Kite. If you liked what you heard on the show today, make sure you subscribe to us in iTunes and leave us a review. To learn more about today's topic, head over to our show page at contentkite.com/podcast and search for this episode. We'll have all of the tools, links, and references that we mentioned on the show, as well as some additional bonus content. Thanks again. Look forward to seeing you next week.